So today's panel is about smart manufacturing, the next industrial revolution. My three panelists are Ryan Zimmerman with VKS, David McPhail with MEMEX, Neil Desrosiers with Mazak Corporation, and John Burg from Acieta. So I'm going to have each one of the panelists introduce themselves, tell a little bit about their company, and maybe one thing that you could take away from today's presentation. And I would like to make this as interactive as possible, so we do have a microphone. We'll do questions at the end. But if something comes up during the panel, feel free to just raise your hand and we'll get out to you with a question. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to John Burg from Acieta to do a little introduction and how their company sort of fits in the smart manufacturing industrial revolution. John?
Well, it's always wonderful to get to go first. Good morning. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, or our office is actually in Council Bluffs, Iowa, across the river. We've been integrating industrial robots for almost 35 years. And of course, for probably the first 20 plus, there was very little talk about how equipment communicated outside of the cell. There was a lot of talk about how robots would talk to, for this audience, mostly machine tools or PLCs or whatever the device, but very rarely was anybody really interested in how it might communicate with factory systems, etc. That started to change, maybe, and I'm just estimating, maybe 10 years ago. Now it's a big part of the discussion. A lot of people want to know how they can gather a lot more information from their equipment. We try to support that the best we can. Of course, everybody has somewhat their own idea of what they want to do. And so there's lots of different options that we get to talk about. But at the end of the day, it usually has to do with understanding what the cell is doing from a production standpoint. What are the interruptions that are causing downtime? Is it being tended correctly? Because still many cells have some manual intervention along the way. And finally, what's the quality of the product coming out of the cell? And so those are seem like they're the major issues. Of course, on the other side is how do you get data in? How to get down to things like part programs for the CNC equipment, or maybe other devices in the cells, and so we try our best to help support that information as much as possible. So from a takeaway standpoint, my thought process is, if you just walk this show, if you come down and talk to these gentlemen to my right about how their equipment can communicate, there's plenty of technology. I can't imagine the question that could come out today that isn't somehow someone at this show or very closely at hand that couldn't answer your question.
Neil?
Good morning. My name is Neil Desrosiers. I'm with Mazak Corporation. I've been with them at corporate headquarters now for about 30 years. My background is application engineering, and more recently I got Microsoft certified some years ago, but I'm Mazak's representative at the MT Connect Institute in the technical advisory group, and I'm the chairperson for the machine tool work group. So I get together with all the machine tool builders, and we help develop the MT Connect standard, which is an open communications data model. My focus at Mazak right now is implementing the iSmart factory and taking the technology that we're using from MT Connect and our collaboration with Cisco, and make sure that we're connecting the machines correctly, we're doing it securely, and then in turn sharing that with our customers. So I teach our MT Connect boot camps, and part of that 2-day course is we actually tour the factory and we help customers understand how to get started with connecting machines and the possibilities with IoT.
David?
My name is Dave McPhail. I'm the president and CEO of MEMEX. We have a booth here at 2617, which is a couple of miles over here. We measure manufacturing excellence. Essentially what that means is we connect the shop floor to the top floor in real time. We take the data from the equipment, the human capital that operates it, and bidirectionally tune from ERP. And a combination of those three data streams allows us to calculate overall equipment effectiveness, or OEE, which is essentially the distillation of the Six Sigma principles of waste. Our customers, we've done this 150 plus times, and on average we generate approximately a 300% internal return rate of capital, or about a 4-month payback. So we essentially do data-driven manufacturing. Think of IoT, Industry 4.0, or IoT as data-driven manufacturing, because that seems to be a lot easier for people to understand. Some nebulous terms like IoT, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do I monetize an IoT strategy? And we can help you, we can explain that for you and help you go through that journey. So from a takeaway perspective, my one thing to challenge people in the audience is this technology is available today. This is not a ethereal mist or a theoretical construct. It actually exists today, and it's generating tremendous value for companies that go down this path. And I think that, without a start, there isn't an end, or we have to begin. So I invite you to challenge yourselves to take the journey, or start to take the journey, and educate yourself. There's lots of good information here, as John said. So happy to talk to people after this panel.
Ryan?
Good. Yeah, so my name is Ryan Zimmerman, Director of Business Development at VKS. And we actually provide an innovative software solution to create and share digital work instructions all the way to a full manufacturing execution system. So kind of a neat type of solution. And really what's interesting about our company is that we actually come from a manufacturing organization initially. So we had a sister company with about 350 employees who, back in the day, they were looking for many different ways to actually improve their operations. And this was a little before we started to hear about the fourth industrial revolution. So they had actually done some analysis and realized that with their environment being a high mix, low volume company, vertically integrated with many different products going through the shop, they had a very difficult time maintaining high levels of quality and productivity. So it was at this point that this company actually devised the VKS solution to be able to capture and share best practices within their workforce to ensure that the operators could actually perform the setup on machines, inspections, and assembly type operations in an effective manner. So kind of a little bit of a different story coming from our company, again, focusing more on the operator experience within Industry 4.0. And one of the neat things I think that could be interesting to take away from the panel is to look at all the different solutions out there that are available today. And again, as David had mentioned, to realize that there's many different ways companies can go to improve. And one of the most interesting ones is to actually look towards the workforce and provide them with tools to ensure that they can be as effective as possible within their own jobs, so that they could achieve the goals that you're outlining for them. So yeah, that'll be pretty good for now.
So for a small to medium, possibly a large size shop out in the audience, where do they get started? So they get back to their shop next week, what's the first thing they do? Who wants to, Neil, can you tackle that one?
Sure. So I get approached with that question a lot, and customers want to know how to get started. And the first thing I usually tell them is you have to do a factory assessment. You got to do an inventory of what type of equipment you have. Identify where your bottlenecks are, and all of this is in effect so that you can decide which machines that you want to hook up first. In my opinion, what protocol you're going to use and how you're going to do that connectivity is actually becoming pretty well established. And I'm mentioning MT Connect as the standard protocol, and you're going to do an Ethernet connection, so you're going to network the machines, but doing it securely. And that is a step that a lot of people forget to do, is they want to go out and quickly hook up the machines, or they say they're already connected to their network, but there's not that much emphasis on the security layer. And today, with all of the ransomware and hacking and viruses on factory floors that are happening, this is becoming very, very critical, and something that we at Mazak have been focusing a lot on lately. So get the inventory down, the machine inventory, identify your bottlenecks, which machines do you want to start connecting first, maybe do a small pilot, and then work from there, identifying what type of software you want to use, depending on what your goals are.
Who else? Who wants to add to that? David?
Yeah, so I would say that the first discussion point should always be the why. I mean, being bombarded with what to try to take this technology to the next level or even get started, the business case should always be the first thing that gets discussed. The why. What's the return on investment? When you go, did my mic just go up?
Yeah, I think your mic just went up.
Hey, we're back?
You're good.
Okay, sorry. So the why is the most important thing. When you go to buy a new car, what does the salesman want to do? He wants to put you in the driver's seat. He wants you to envision you driving down the road in this brand new car. It's exactly the same when you take on a technology deployment under the umbrella of the industrial Internet of Things. You want to be able to visualize yourself receiving that return on investment and understanding what that return on investment is before you pick a path of which way you want to go. What's the business outcome? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Because that's what you're going to use to benchmark the success of a project, whether it's work instructions or machine monitoring or anything else, or even robot tending, right? You got to understand the return on investment first. The why should always be the first thing we talk about.
John, Ryan, anything to add?
I think I would agree 100% with these gentlemen. But the one question that I think is needs to be asked is the whole organization, and this isn't just about this topic, but the whole organization needs to be involved in these discussions. Sometimes it happens from an engineering level on up. Sometimes it's trickled down from the C-suites down through engineering. But lots of times I find that we tend to not bring the shop floor into the discussion. And I think that's a travesty, because these policies or these practices get pushed to the shop floor, and they don't understand, as David just said, the why. Why would we do this? What is in this to help me get my job or do my job better or easier, or et cetera? So I think it's and I'm not talking about weeks and months here. I'm talking about just, one or two really good, solid conversations about what we're trying to accomplish, and you can get an awful lot of benefit out of that.
Brett, I'm sorry. Speak loud.
Neil, you mentioned cybersecurity and hacking. So with all the ransomware attacks this spring, does that become a major impediment for small, medium-sized companies getting started on the smart manufacturing security?
Right. So the question is with all the security issues happening now, is that becoming a big issue here with small, medium-sized companies? And I would say, yes, it is. It's not an impediment, other than the way you need to network your factory floor and provide that security is a little different than what was done in the past. So today, IT departments, and I always talk about this, how the IT departments put that layer of security at the door between the office and the factory. And they'll give the factory their own network, and they tell them to do whatever you want out there. We'll help you and provide information and support, but we're not going to allow any connectivity going into the office. And that edge of the network has to move out. We have to get that edge of the network pushed all the way out to the equipment. And that equipment, if you're saying I want to do X, Y, and Z with the data, like Dave's saying, you got to have a why, and you know where you want to go with it, then you've already admitted to yourself that the data is mission critical. So now how do I go forth and get the data and connect that equipment? If your IT isn't on board with making that edge of the network out at the equipment and making the equipment a first-class citizen on your domain, then it's not going to work. You're not going to get the data that you want in the format you want. So we're promoting getting that high-end security devices out at the edge of the network and allowing the data to flow and putting security in the hands of where it needs to be, and that is in the IT department.
Okay. So I guess my next question is how do these guys, how do they justify the expense? What can they expect to get in return? And possibly can some of you share case histories of success stories? So why don't I turn that over to Ryan?
Yep, for sure. So again, as we've been discussing, a lot of different ways companies can go towards improving, and one of the main elements is you do see a lot of individuals who are excited about the future and looking towards implementing these initiatives, but you do also see some other people who can be a little hesitant. And really, if you approach these initiatives in a strategic fashion, you are bound to see success. And if we relate back a little bit, just from my own experience back to that sister company, when they actually initially implemented the software solution, VKS, at their organization, as well as a lot of other activities that were going on at the time, such as newer and advanced machinery and so on, they actually managed to achieve about a 20% increase in productivity across the shop. Now, this didn't just happen overnight. It did take about a year or so to actually achieve these types of levels. But it just goes to show that if you approach new initiatives in a strategic fashion and actually look that direction, you could begin to see a lot of benefits immediately. So I think that's one of the messages I would give there.
David, you got a good case history?
Yeah, so we worked with a company that makes landing gear, and At the time that company was started for Resources, they had a continuous improvement program, and I guess you can appreciate that landing gear is very complex to make, and there's long cycle times. Some of the roughing cycles on these forgings are 24 to 48 hours in length. And so what they had to do was, if you walked in there and you saw the operator reading the newspaper, you would say, well, that's not really a good use of resources. So they took a couple of those resources and put them in another part of the factory, and then had one person tend 3 machines. Well, these machines are 3 times the size of this stage, and they're approximately 50 yards apart. And when you put in M0s and M01s into programs, but for those of you that are not in CNC machining, the only way the machine starts again is the operator has to hit the cycle button. And so what would happen is they were collecting approximately 400 hours of lost time, because this one person, while they're taking a very expensive, approximately $200,000 raw forging and craning that into the machine and touching it off, getting it ready to start the initial cycle, and a machine would go down 50 yards away. Well, this person's not going to leave this expensive piece of forging with a serial number on it, swinging in the crane saddle, well, goes over and hits the button. And so what they did was they brought an initiative of people together, programmers and operational people, production people, and they actually streamlined their programs. And in some cases, these M0s were in these programs for 5 years. They were originally proved out. This particular piece of landing gear was for Boeing, and Boeing approved the program, but they didn't need these M0s in the programs anymore, and they didn't see it because they weren't measuring it, right? You can't manage what you cannot measure. So they went through, they stripped out all of the superfluous M0s and M01s, and actually achieved a 400-hour per month improvement, which made approximately a $40,000 net difference to the bottom line. So, in it, you'd say to yourself, well, they should just see that. But tyranny of the immediate takes over. Everybody gets busy, and next thing you know, they don't see it, and it goes on for years in some cases. That's a lot of money. That's $40,000 a month times. It's like It's a $2.5 million improvement if you look at 5 years ago when these programs first started hitting the factory floor.
Neil, John, any success stories you want to share?
Yeah, actually, Mazak's factory in Kentucky. When we first started hooking it up, we were doing it department by department. Most of our equipment was already networked, but we started implementing Dave's product in there, and we said, let's just do one department at a time. Let's get the dashboarding up. Make sure that the data is correct and it's flowing, and we'll go to the next department. And by the time we got to the third department, about 4, 5, 6 months have gone by, and we didn't realize how much increased performance and utilization that we had in the equipment. But there was a lot of questions being asked. Hey, why is that machine down? Why is this? And all it's going to do is, that low-hanging fruit, you start asking questions. The next thing you know, you're fixing things, and the machines are becoming more efficient. You start seeing the M0s in all the programs, and they're taking those out. After 9 months, we went back, and we actually started doing reports, and we started seeing the curve of increased performance. The first few months I was talking about was 6, 7%. After 9 months, 10 months, we were at 17% increase in utilization, and most of it was all just low-hanging fruit. So we weren't really doing targeted improvements at that point. So it's amazing just measuring and seeing the data, how much you can correct.
John?
Yeah, I think probably been sitting here thinking about different examples, but I think one of the, I would say is from a quality standpoint, we had a customer who bought a couple systems to, actually 2 that work together, and they're driving screws, and they decided they were going to collect data on every screw driven. And these systems were mounting printed circuit boards into an aluminum housing. And the application for this device is a pretty rugged piece of agricultural equipment. It gets beat up in the field literally every day. And when they did that, I thought, wow, that's really amazing. You've got an average of 20 plus screws in every housing, and you're collecting all this data about every single one of the installations. But they were able to virtually eliminate the issue with printed circuit boards coming loose in their product. And they didn't have a big problem. It was relatively minor, but when that farmer's out in the field driving through the field and all of a sudden his tractor stops, it's pretty major to him. And it is interesting when you can gather this data and you actually find results with it. And it's all these gentlemen say. But you have to have that what is your goal? In this case, it was quality.
So what data do you start to collect? Where do you start? How do you start from machine to machine? How does that work? So David, can you tackle that? What should you start with?
Well, I think the most important signal, if you had to pick one signal to the exclusion of everything else, you want to know when that piece of equipment's under program control. Because when the machine's under program control, that means that it's doing work, right? Now, let's save and accept the fact that somebody turned the feed rate to 0. You can still have the green stack light on and the machine's not doing anything. But let's assume that the feed rate was at 100%. When that machine's on green, it's under program control. It's actually doing what it was designed to do and what it was tasked to do with that particular job. So I said if I had to pick one signal to start with, it would be in cycle. Because you have in cycle time and you have all the other downtime associated with the reasons why the machine is not in cycle. The next group of data that I would take would be things like feed hold, e-stop, alarm, M0 we talked about already. But then I'd also look at another data stream. I'd look at the data stream that's the human capital that actually operates the equipment. Because if you looked at the uptime, if you talked to any machine builder, and Mazak I'm sure is no different here, and you said, what's the uptime of our machine, this particular machine tool in this cell? Probably say somewhere around 98, 99%. But the reality is, most of the time, the reason why the machine isn't running is not because the machine's not capable of running the part, it's because it doesn't have the right tooling, or it doesn't have an operator, or it doesn't have dunnage to put the finished parts on, or any one of a number of reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with the efficiency of the process when it's under program control. So I would say that the confluence of those two data streams, from the human capital and actual automatic data from the machine, are probably the two most important data streams. To be able, in our case, we calculate OEE, so we need to know all this in superfluous downtime, because then we can give the operational management team a completely different situational awareness tool to monitor and monetize this downtime into productive time. And we've seen companies go from average of 65%, or sorry, average of 35%. They think they're 65% to world class at 85%, which is a big jump. If you were producing your product at 35% and you get your productivity up to 85%, it's a factory and a bit of additional capacity that you already had that you didn't know that you had. So we call that revealing the hidden factory.
Brett?
David, I've been hearing about how it's all right to collect and understand data about machines, but when it comes to collecting and understanding data about humans, that's a really big cultural hurdle. Are you finding that to be true?
Yeah, I think that the best projects that we have are when the operators, the operational team at the shop floor, are part of the decision tree. So when they're part of the group of people that says we're going to go down this journey, we're going to do it together. The best implementations that we have are when they're part of the team. In other words, this isn't foisted upon them, or as an edict from upper management, you guys are going to do this. It's like, we're going to do this, and then all the why questions get asked, like, why are we doing this? And it's the biggest, I think, if you don't do that, here's what the operator thinks. It's Big Brother, right? So they want it to monitor me. The reality is, usually the operator is not the problem here. It's all of the other support services around, like the people that bring the tooling, like the people that take the parts away, and on and on and on. That small little targeted improvements will unlock a tremendous amount of capacity utilization.
Neil, John, anything to add on the data front? What should they collect? How should they collect it?
Yeah, I agree with Dave with the priority there about what to measure. And I do second his comment about getting input from the operators. The whole Big Brother thing is real interesting, unless they have input. And we had one individual in particular who was resistant to it, and I said, look, this operator portal that we have here is your best friend. The systems are being monitored. There's tons of decisions that are being made upstairs, whether it's fixture design, the process of the part, the speeds and feeds, the cutters, the clamping, and so on. By the time all of this reaches the factory floor, you're like this magician. You do your voodoo magic and you get the machine running, and you have to get it running, but it's not running the cycle time because of all the things that were decided ahead of time that weren't kept. In other words, somebody said, you're going to buy this $500 face mill and it'll run so fast, but somebody bought the cheaper one, it doesn't run as fast. Or these fixtures are supposed to clamp at a certain pressure and they don't, so you have to slow the machine down, and so on. You make it work, but then you're being criticized or blamed for the system not running to performance. So what do? You go over to the portal and you say, I don't have the face mill that was originally processed. I had to slow it down. And you put all these assignable causes in for why the cycle time isn't the way it is. They change the standard for that part. But you also say, I didn't have the tools in time. I didn't have the materials and the machines down because of that. And when you go to that weekly meeting and you walk in there and they say, okay, we see production maybe is down, there's absolutely no questions. I mean, as an operator, you go in there with confidence knowing that you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's. You did your job. So it usually makes people accountable, that people who made decisions and maybe made a poor decision, it puts accountability back where it needs to be.
Yeah, and I think that I agree 100%. And I think what's really critical, though, from a management standpoint is the people on the shop floor have to see corrective action. If
Yes.
all you do is constantly gather data and they really are providing feedback and nothing is changing, it will drop off at an unbelievable rate. I mean, these people are not going to do this for months with no activity. If they don't see some kind of tangible results coming from their input, literally in I'd say maximum of a couple weeks, and they're going to just throw up their hands and say, well, they never pay any attention to the data I put in anyhow. So.
David?
I got an example. So we worked with another company that makes office furniture. They're I think the second largest manufacturer of office furniture in the world. And I actually did that implementation, so I was on site at the time, and I was looking at the data that we collected for the 2 days, and I saw 950 times a shift, a particular downtime or an incident count and an aggregate amount of downtime. But the thing that tweaked me was 950 times a shift, the operator has to touch this button on the control panel. And so I went over and I asked the operator, I said, do you have to do this? I said, show me the process. So yeah, well, I can't get the machine to automatically advance, so I have to go into manual mode and then back into automatic mode, and that will advance the part. And I have to do that every time a part comes out the end of this machine. It's like a panel saw. It's like an automatic panel saw, a big one actually. And I said, really? So I brought the maintenance guy over and I said, do you realize that the operator here has to? And he said, well, before you go talk to the maintenance guys, I've been telling them this for 5 years. He goes, and they won't fix it. Right? So I said, well, they say, yeah, but now we have the data. Let's go talk to the maintenance guy. So we brought the maintenance guy over and said, look, this guy has to do this 950 times, and you're losing about an hour and a quarter of production time. I said, maybe you want to check the root cause of this problem. So they went and they found that a valve, a $250 valve, had been sticking. The actual poppet in the valve had been sticking, a little air, like a little Bimba air valve. And so they replaced it. It took them 2 weeks to get the part, and they replaced it. I did that back in the napkin calculation. I said, how long has this problem existed? They said, operator said, I've been telling them this for 5 years. So I went to the management and I said, okay, this many hours times this many dollars per hour times this much time, elapsed time. I said, that's a $2 million valve. That's $400,000 of money that you guys blew every year for 5 years. I mean, but for 5 years, the operator wasn't engaged because he would say it was broken. The maintenance guy would come over and maybe it didn't stick that time. I don't know. Maybe there was a disconnect between the respect of the operator and the maintenance guy. I have no idea. But that was a $2 million valve that company could have bought 5 years ago and saved $2 million. So it was a pretty decent return on investment. Let's leave it at that.
Okay. Anybody else on that topic? So you touched on the workforce before. Why don't we go a little deeper on, is the existing workforce going to be able to tackle this assignment? Is it new people? Is it new roles? Is it new job descriptions? How does somebody in the audience sort of tackle that project as far as turning their team over, changing their culture, bringing in a new workforce? Ryan, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, for sure. So speaking about the workforce again, you've got a lot of different operators within an organization. Some may have been there for 20 years, others just starting, tomorrow as an example. But one thing that is really key is to actually be able to work with them to capture that tribal knowledge and to understand how they're actually operating on the shop floor. As we were just discussing, very often, if you implement new solutions, it can be perceived as a big brother type of activity. And really that derives from the lack of engagement with the workforce. So if you actually speak with them and engage with them and discuss, what you're trying to do, what you're implementing, and work with them to understand how they do their job, what actually ends up happening is it gives them a sense of pride as well. And this even makes them more excited to be a part of these projects, and then at the end of the day, with this combination of events, you end up getting a higher level of success. So now you're understanding again what's going on the shop floor, what the operator's doing, and you're sharing that knowledge with everyone else so that you don't end up repeating these same mistakes.
Panel, what to add on the workforce?
Well, I would say don't underestimate the transformational and disruptive benefits associated with this technology. It really is transformative and it really is disruptive, but both in a good way. I mean, I just gave you an example of where there was an employee opinion that was essentially ignored for 5 years. I can give you dozens of examples where when the operator input is objective, not subjective. In other words, it's not an opinion; it's a fact. That the culture of the company changes. But I would argue that really needs to be managed up front, so that companies have to include as we said earlier, the operational management team in the decision to deploy this technology, because they have a vital role to play. And if they don't understand what that role is and what the responsibility is within that role, then the success of the project is going to take longer than it otherwise should have or could have. In other words, the return on investment will elongate without the operator and the operational management team's input on how to move forward. In other words, what's the roadmap? What cadence are we going to follow? What's our expected outcome? All those things need to be talked about, and it's part of the culture change and the culture shift and essentially change management that most companies go through when they embark upon this journey.
Sure.
Neil?
I have some customers that approach me and they say, we want to do this IoT thing. And I ask them the question like that Dave asked. It's like, well, why? What do you want to achieve by that? They say, we're not sure. We know that if we stand still, we're going to get left left behind. We have to do something. And I said, well, in a few weeks, you could probably look at a bunch of different softwares, make some sort of decision about where you want to go or something like that. But in the meantime, you probably have about a month or two or longer of some work that has to be done no matter what you decide to do with that data. So I always say there's two constants when it comes to moving towards Industry 4.0 or IoT, and that is you got to choose how that data is going to come out of the equipment, and you have to choose how you're going to get it connected, and you got to actually do that work. So if you have a factory that nothing's networked, just start there. Just say, hey, I want to be prepared. It's going to take me 2, 3, 4 months to get everything networked. I'm going to make everything MT Connect compliant, and hopefully in that 4-month period, you've been evaluating, what benefits that you're going to get. What's the why? The answer to the why question, and you'll have a little bit further direction to where you're going to go. But you've got to be prepared. You don't just come out and say, all right, I want to do OEE, and let's start. Are we going to have reports next week? It's not going to happen that quick. You have to get started connecting your equipment.
John, any more thoughts on the workforce culture?
Yeah, I think we're all singing from the same hymnal here, but it is so important. But on the other hand, as you move up the organization, and not in capability, but people-wise, I think we just find an awful lot of people are so busy that they have more initiatives than they can possibly accomplish. And so they especially I see this in manufacturing engineering groups, et cetera, shop floor supervision. These people are, it's like 3 fires today and 4 more tomorrow. And so there has to come some direction about, we are going to make a priority out of this. And we are going to see this happen and carry through. If you start these kinds of programs and 2 months down the way, nobody's talking about it anymore, and it's just flavor of the month again. And you just have to decide at some kind of a strategic level, like we're talking about, this is the priority for my organization, and I'm going to get at least to this level.
Anything else? Anybody else to add? So where are we in the overall development cycle? Smart manufacturing industry 4.0. Where is it today? Where is it going to be in 3 to 5 years? Are we just at the front end? I mean, Ryan, you want to tackle that? Where's smart manufacturing in the development cycle?
Yeah, so again, in my opinion, from what I'm seeing, I think that it is still a little early on. Working with different companies, we do tend to see that a lot of the larger organizations have gone quite deep into these initiatives and are using it at their different facilities. But when you come back to small and medium-sized companies, I think that for a lot of those organizations, they're starting to awaken to this revolution and understand that there's lots of different directions they can go for improvement. So personally, in my opinion, I think that we're still a little bit at the beginning of this revolution, but with all the the different hype and a lot of the solutions that are coming out, we should see that it continues to progress in this direction. And in the next 3 to 5 years, I do think that the majority of companies out there are going to be using paperless solutions. They will have connected factories, and I do think that is something that'll come a little quicker than we expect from here.
Rest of the panel, David, I'm sure you got some thoughts on this.
Oh, maybe a few. I think we're at the early adopter stage. I don't know how many machine tools are in North America, but there's probably, if you look across all genres of manufacturing, it's probably 300,000, 400,000 machine tools in North America. We've connected 7,000 of those across 150 customers. So we have a long way to go. We're still at the early adopter stage where, people, I'll give you an example. I'm an early adopter of cell phone technologies. Every time a new cell phone comes out, I get it because, I guess because I like to send an Apple money, but beyond that, I actually use it. It transforms my life. I use it every day. I probably spend more time on my phone than I do on my laptop or my tablet. So I'm an early adopter of that, and I'll continue to be an early adopter of that technology. 9 out of 10 companies that we talk to, probably a little bit higher than that, maybe 9.5 out of 10, don't have a connected factory. They don't take data from any equipment on their factory floor. What I mean by connected factory is I can take out my cell phone and I can see what's going on my factory floor in real time. 9.5 out of 10 companies don't have that. So from our vantage point, if I look at from MEMEX's business, it's a very much a greenfield opportunity. But the challenge that we have as a company is, even though we know that these transformational benefits are of tremendous value in terms of the bottom line, it still is very much identification. People are still saying, well, you don't understand my business, I'm different. And so we have to kind of jump that hurdle too. And once we get to the identification piece where we get more customers doing it with more published case studies, people can say, yeah, well, I'm sort of like that company over there. I'm sort of like that company over there. I could see myself going down this path. I still think we're probably, and if I looked at the 4 stages of technology lifecycle adoption, I think we're probably not going to hit early majority for probably another 24 months. 18 to 24 months would be my guess. And I think when it happens, it will be a very steep curve after that, because now you've changed the paradigm, and people are now do not want to be left behind. They do not want to be the last person on the bus. They won't have a seat. And so I think that will change, but I think that's going to take, if I'm going to guess, or I had a crystal ball, I'd say 18 to 24 months.
So what will it look like in 18 to 24 months? You're seeing you're going to be a hockey stick curve. Once it catches, it's going to catch?
I think you'll see a lot of people, if you're not doing it, you'll be the exception to the rule. As opposed to right now, if you're doing it, you're an early adopter, and you talk to 10 of your peers, and you'll find that nobody's doing it, and so you're essentially blazing this trail.
Okay.
And I think in 18 to 24 months, it'll be the people that haven't gone down this journey will be the exception to the rule, as opposed to the other way around.
Neil, do you agree with Dave?
Yeah, I do. And it's interesting. Is I think in a few years from now, we don't know where Industry 4.0, IoT, all the new technology that's going to be coming out. We don't know where that's going to be in 10 years from now. And I think companies really struggle with getting projects approved because management wants to see this roadmap. They want to see everything, all the technology laid out, and they want a dollar value. And they say, okay, we're going to spend so many million or whatever doing this. And you just start out small and grow. And I think in a few years from now, everyone's going to have those common things that they're all doing. You hear about utilization, OEE, preventative maintenance, and diagnostics and things like that. And a good example is I tell our salesmen, if you're talking to one of our customers, they're a good customer, offer this IoT stuff and talk to them about it. And I went into one company and he didn't have the time of day. He didn't want to talk to me. He was too busy keeping the machines running. But every customer has one thing that's a crutch. It's their pain. And I start talking about all these different things that we can do with monitoring and with sensors and things like that. And I hit the nail on the head and I said, we can monitor coolant, we can do concentration, pH. And he stopped and he turned around and he looked at me and he goes, you can do coolant? And apparently they had this massive problem and they spent hundreds and thousands and thousands of dollars on fixing this problem, trying to address a coolant problem with concentration. Whether it be the water in the area, the hardness isn't right, and you're getting foaming. Basically, they needed to monitor it. And right there, just that one issue, just that one piece of data, monitoring that was going to justify implementing all of the whole factory, 50 plus machines. And if you find that one thing and you start out with that, you're still going to have to connect all your equipment. You're still going to have to choose how you want to get the data and consider security. But what are you going to do with that data? Why do I need to have that data, as Dave said? Why? Because it's going to solve my problem. It's going to reduce my expenses on scrap and so on. So that's usually how I approach it with a customer.
So is there typically multiple pain points, or it could usually be identified as just 1, 2, or 3 pain points?
It can be. I mean, every customer is different, but usually there's one pain point in particular that if you can hit on it, then they start listening to it and they realize, I can do that, really? And what's it going to give me? What's that ROI?
David?
I think there's 3 things in any factory that are constantly in flux. There's the people, right? We have people that retire or they move on, or we hire new people. And so that speaks to Ryan's work instruction piece. We have equipment. People are constantly buying new equipment, refreshing equipment. It's about a 5% refresh rate at the present time, and then the product that the company makes. Most companies are looking to expand their line of business or take on new parts. So you have those three things that are constantly in flux. And if you're not monitoring the process with respect to having the data from the machines and actually calculating, and I'll just use our business use case of OEE, you're not going to know when those things go offside. If you're monitoring it, however, and one of those three things changes and it actually affects the actual overall number for a particular job, say you ran it a month ago and you ran it at 68% OEE, and now you're running the same job, but it's a different person or it's on a different machine, and you're producing it at 48% OEE, you know where that 20% is lost, you can actually fix it. So in a relatively short period of time, you can get back to the numbers that you used to produce that part at before. And let's just assume the reason for that is it's a different operator. You have a different operator who doesn't know that tribal knowledge about how to get that part done, or special things that he has to do with the control. Maybe it's a feed rate issue or whatever. So yeah, I would say that those are key to understanding those constraints.
We have about 10 minutes for questions. I'll ask the panel. Is there anything I missed before we go out to the audience for questions? Any topics? Anything?
I'd just like to make one quick comment, and that is, to some extent, I think technology is the fact that we are all aware that technology is changing so fast that we have a tendency to think, well, yeah, it all looks good today, but if I just wait a year, I'll bet you there's going to be something even better. And I just think that you have to start. And yeah, there will be something better in a year. But the magic pill is never going to come. So you just have to start and go from there.
Okay, Brett. This is my colleague. This is my colleague Brett Bruno, who's the editor-in-chief of Smart Manufacturing Magazine, and he works for me, and he always has questions. Brett.
I was wondering if a company waits for 18 or really 24 months to become a connected factory, isn't that really taking a gigantic risk? Because especially with China making a shift from cheap to smart and other countries advancing wildly like Germany, isn't waiting 2 years really a huge risk?
Well, as I said earlier, like just in our business use case, a 300% internal return rate or 4-month payback, if we started an implementation at the first day of your new fiscal year, we would have given you that capital back 3 times to redeploy it.
Yeah.
In 12 months. So, why it takes 18 months or 2 years, I can't explain it. I've been in this business for a decade now, and I would have thought that, and if I owned a manufacturing company, I would have done this like long time ago. But I don't understand why it takes so long for people to understand. I think it has a lot to do with putting people in the driver's seat and having them envision and understanding why, the business outcome, what am I expecting out of this journey, and having them visualize themselves at least stepping back, at the other side of that journey and realizing those benefits. I think that takes that imagination piece takes a lot, especially when John was talking about the tyranny of the immediate. That's what we call it, where everybody's so busy doing everything to keep the machines running or keep the parts going out the door. They don't have time to sit back, relax, and visualize what this journey is going to be at the end. And that's what we call it. I call it tyranny of the immediate.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I actually have seen, I'll say, an uptick in purchases and of empty connected adapters to make machines compliant, and the downloading of information from our websites from foreign countries, okay, places that we might want to reshore from. And that tells me that A, we're hitting on something that's going to be very successful. B, they see that, and they're getting scared, and they're saying, we can't let them get that far out ahead of us. So the companies that are early adopters now, or that are implementing it, they're being successful, and they're moving, and they're making a difference in what they're bringing back. Foreign countries are seeing that, they're reacting to it, and so now they're going to fight for it. If we have somebody here in the States that's not beginning and starting to do that, I think the urgency is starting to become greater, and I see this huge uptick right now in the people adopting the technology.
Hello. So, as for right now, so far, I have seen 6 suppliers here for these systems. Some of them sell the hardware and the software, and most of them just the software. And 3 more I found on the website. And eventually, we will have a proliferation of suppliers, right, for these systems. I see. So far, I have 9 contacted, And what will be the biggest mistake to avoid in picking one of them? Because it is not like $100 bill and then I change.
This one with MT Connect.
So my boss will not allow me to make a mistake. Oh, okay, so this supplier was the one we chose and then they are bankruptcy and we don't have any more support. What would be the biggest mistake to avoid?
So I'll field that question. So I'm going to put my MT Connect Institute hat on. MT Connect was developed to solve one problem, and that is builders, machine tool builders, and software companies, and everybody in industry from having that proprietary system tied to your machine tools. And you choose that one system, it's proprietary, you say they go out of business, it's a perfect example, and all of a sudden you're stuck. What do I do? With MT Connect, because it's open, nobody owns it, it's run by a nonprofit, it's open, it's royalty free, anybody can use it. Just about every machine tool builder has adopted it and makes their equipment compliant. Every day I have new product companies that are making products, they want to make their products MT Connect compliant. The PLC market is very interested in it and looking at it. And I think that going down that road, once you have that common data model above your factory, all of these systems will be plug and play. If in a year that company goes out of business, you choose another one, you get it up and running, and it'll just continue going because you have that open platform.
Okay, thank you. And my next question will be, what is the biggest challenge or bottleneck, I would say, when implementing this system? Is it the factory noise? Because so far we have like over 1,000 presses working. And is it the wireless noise or the resistance of the people to adopt the system? Well, what is the most common challenge?
You're not going to like this answer, but I'm going to say vacuum of leadership. Right? I mean, it's really, it has to come from, somebody has to propose the idea, that there has to be consensus built, and then there has to be decisions made, there has to be some money spent, and then there has to be some benefits received so that you can repeat the process again. And I think the leadership, the analysis paralysis, if you can, and I'm not just saying this from MEMEX's perspective, I'm sure every technology vendor would love to have their technology adopted quicker. But what I find is the analysis paralysis of trying to figure out what path to go down and what business use case to use. And that's why I always say with our salespeople, we need to really spend all of our time up front talking about the why. Because we want the customer to understand that this is the transformation and the journey that they're going to go through over the next, say, 3 months or 4 months or whatever the timeline is, depending on the size of the project. So it takes leadership. It takes thought leadership.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else anything to add to that? Tell me about your shop. I can see that you're looking at this. Tell me about what you guys do now. How big you
Well,
are.
we do only, it's metal stamping, the drawer slides. It's Acura International. We are located in, well, Santa Fe Springs is the corporate, but the main factory is in Mexicali, Mexico. And right now our shop floor, we need some modern technology to monitor the process, right?
Right.
Yeah, and we are looking for a supplier, but we don't want to make a mistake.
Of course.
We need, yeah. My
Nobody
last
does.
question will be, like the wireless surveillance cameras, like 5 years ago, I don't remember to see them off the shelf, like in Amazon. Right now, it's a friendly thing, plug and play. But by what year do you think this software, this hardware is going to be off the shelf, like
Yesterday.
the cameras?
It's available today.
It's available now.
But
It's available now.
Right now, if I go to eBay or something, or probably Walmart, I don't see anything like this.
Well, I would argue that Walmart's not the right store for this technology, but no, it's available today. You can light up any legacy asset or any legacy machine or a newer. Just use Mazak as an example. And Mazak, well, you guys upgrade back to Windows 95, right?
Yep.
So you can buy an adapter. If you had a Mazak machine, 640, you can go all the way back to Windows 95 machine and turn it into an MT Connect capable machine. And all the legacy assets, there's like, I'm just using our company, we have hardware, but we have competitors too. There is hardware available to make these machines MT Connect compliant. And that's where I think you should start, because then you have choice. Then you have the ability to pick a software vendor that solves a particular business outcome. You know, whether it's in our case OEE, or it could be work instructions, it could be anything else of a business use case outcome, or you can some companies will do all of them simultaneously over time. So they'll have one software package for TPPM, total predictive production maintenance. They'll have another one for work instructions. They'll have another one for OEE. These are all that gives you choice, but putting that infrastructure in, I think, is foundational to actually moving forward. And it's available today. It's not, we sell it every day.
Right here.
Hi. You talk a lot about the leadership decisions and shop managers making the decisions for their factories. What role does a machine tool manufacturer have in this smart manufacturing, and what level of implementation should they expect to have their customers benefit from?
So what are the expectations of the builder from the customers? Our customers come to us for guidance, and they say, well, number one, can you make your machines compliant? And they want help. So one of the first things we did was implement a training course. So quarterly we do these 2-day boot camps, and we don't just talk about MT Connect, although that's the core of it. We talk about a lot of things, and I'm working with these different product providers to make things available for you, and I share that with our customers and to let them be aware of what's available. And then more recently, the whole security thing. Software companies, they don't typically want to go out and worry about the machine side or how to get it connected. They say, you get me the data, you make it compliant, I can consume MT Connect, and that's their aspect. But there's a small void in there when it comes to connecting the equipment and security, and that's where we said, you know what, nobody's going to do this. We need to get some people who know what they're talking about involved. We got Cisco involved. We collaborated with them, as an example, and we said, here's what we need on the factory floor. This is what our customers are doing. I get the use cases from you guys. We have our factory. We know what our requirements and use cases are. And then we start building these solutions so that, when he says, I want to be able to find this stuff online, I want to be able to purchase this stuff, we make sure that people have the tools they need to implement and get past that barrier of what product do I use, or where do I go to get that product. So I think there's this, even though we sell machine tools, there's still a little bit of, okay, we have to do this. We have to solve this. If we want our customers to come to us for machine tools and they want us to work with a leader in machines, then we have to do this other stuff. We have to show leadership with IoT, and we have to be able to solve these problems for them and provide them to them. And I think that's what we've done. And we continue to move forward with sensors, learning about it, and then sharing what we've learned with our customers. Does that answer your question? Is that how I understood it?
Yeah, I guess. I guess another way to put it would have been, maybe I'll talk to you a little bit later after the show.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Thank you.
I'm a teacher. I work with special needs kids, and I have a young man in the class who has no eyes and no eyeballs, and he usually sits by himself. He has good hearing. Sits by himself. He doesn't really talk very much. So he won't be able to see any machine at all. So I was wondering if you had any ideas as to what things we can do, because he runs in, when we send him out to play, we're always afraid he's going to run into something. And so and the teachers leave him alone and just let him just wander. So I was trying to come up with a way, either touch something or something that vibrates that would help kind of keep it from running into things mainly.
So is the question how would you apply smart technology for this person in their own environment, or are you asking if there's an opportunities in manufacturing through smart technology for this person?
I just need to know something to help him now, today, to not to collide, or how to avoid, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I know of a lot of our customer base that individuals with special needs, that they have a lot of jobs available for them, whether it be assembly. A lot of these people with special needs are really good at repetitive work and things like that. So even somebody that may have a vision impairment, they can usually find assembly work for them and things like that. But there's probably jobs that are very risky and dangerous that they probably would not put them on, right? But yeah, there's a lot of companies that offer work for them.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody else? So these four guys they'd love to chat with you one-on-one if possible. So I'd like to just thank John Burg from Acieta, David McPhail from MEMEX, Neil Desrosiers from Mazak, and Ryan Zimmerman from visual knowledge share for being part of the panel, and thanks to you guys for also contributing. So smart manufacturing, the next industrial revolution, I think was a great panel. So let's hear it for the panelists.
Thank you.